When last we left me, we were, or me were, I was about to do this source binding lab. We're going to finish this up. We went over some great CDP commands. Like I said, we've got a section of that coming up as well. But let's go ahead and finish this up. Now we need that binding MAC address. And let's see if I can go back that far and grab it. Yep, there it is. So there's the MAC address we need for that particular binding. Let's go ahead and paste it. I always try Control V and it doesn't work. There we go. What's the next thing we need? The binding VLAN. Well, we actually need the word VLAN and then the binding number. And now we need the binding IP address. We saw that was 10.113. Are we going to make it? We're almost at the edge. Interface, binding interface. What else do you need to know? Well, yep. Let's do fast 03. And that's actually it. So let's go ahead and enter that. IP source binding followed by the MAC address, the word VLAN, the VLAN number that it's in, the IP address, and then finally the interface, the local interface, which is interface fast 0/3. And now let's run show IP verify source. And there we go. So now you can see instead of deny all, we've got an IP address of 10.113. We don't have a MAC address because we did not choose to use the MAC address option. And here's what I was talking about with this particular readout. It's really easy to look at that and say, oh, my interface log says fast Ethernet 0/3 is disabled. That is not what's going on here. And again, I've tried several different font sizes, everything, and I still get log right under interface. And all that means, again, the top is referring to the interface, and then this is, this is referring to your smart log setting, and we left that off for disabled. So we are actually all good to go there with our verify source command, and we did all this that I've got on the board. And now let's talk about VLAN hopping. You know, how can something that sounds so much fun be so evil? Well, VLAN hopping techniques, you know, so far we've had ARP used against us, we've had DHCP used against us, we've had IP addresses here in the last lab that could be used against us, IP address spoofing. And now we've got something called VLAN hopping that can actually use .1Q tagging against us. And from your CCNA studies, you know we love .1Q tagging. You know, it's got huge advantages over ISL. And we also know that sometimes on Cisco switches, .1Q is all we can run, so we are kind of out of options there. Well, if we take a few network security tips and put them into action, we can avoid having any problems with VLAN hopping. Now, one form of hopping is called double tagging, and that's where an intruder sends frames that are tagged with two separate VLAN IDs. Some very specific circumstances have to exist for this attack to bear fruit. First, the intruding device has to be attached to an access port. Second, the VLAN used by that access port must be the native VLAN. And of course, ISL wouldn't work at all for this attack, so .1Q must be in use. So there's a lot of prerequisites here for this particular network attack. What happens is that when that rogue host transmits a frame, the frame is going to have two tags, one indicating its native VLAN membership, and the other carrying the VLAN number of the VLAN to be attacked. Now we're going to assume that VLAN 100 is the ultimate target. And I see we got a double illustration there. I'll take one of those out. Well, what happens is that the trunk receiving the double tagged frame sees the tag for the native VLAN, and as usual, that tag is removed and sent across the trunk. That's what we like about the native VLAN concept, is that it's got less overhead because we're going to take that ID tag off. The problem is with double tagging is that the tag for VLAN 100 is still there. So when that remote switch gets the frame, it sees the tag for VLAN 100 and it forwards the frame to ports in that VLAN. Well, the rogue has now successfully hopped, if you will, from one VLAN to the other. Now, it's really easy to look at this and say, you know, big deal. We got all this serious stuff we've been learning about here, and we've got all kinds of other security certifications and security features. Is VLAN hopping really that big a deal? Well, actually, It does seem innocent enough. I'll be the first to say it's like, really, that's what we're worried about. But VLAN hopping has been used for network attacks ranging from Trojan horse virus propagation to stealing bank account numbers and passwords. If you do a Google search on it or use your favorite search engine, you can see all kinds of attacks that were begun, at least, with VLAN hopping. Now, this is a classic solution. I love this. Just make your native VLAN a VLAN that no hosts are actually a member of. Now, you're going to have a little extra overhead as a result, but that stops double tagging in its tracks. Now, you could also go the extra mile or the extra command and actually prune that native VLAN from the trunk. But those are two excellent solutions to prevent any kind of double hopping on your network. Now, switch spoofing, that's a VLAN hopping variation. It's even worse than double tagging because switch spoofing, as you'd guess from the name, allows the rogue to pretend to be a member of all VLANs in our network. Well, the problem here begins with some Cisco switch ports running in dynamic desirable mode by default. Not all of them do now. Most of the newer models do not, but some older ones that are still out there will do that. And what that means, of course, is that a port is sending out those DTP frames, those dynamic trunking protocol frames. That port is aggressively trying to form a trunk. The problem is the switch just knows it's sending DTP frames. It doesn't have any idea who's actually getting them. Basically the switch is hoping, saying, I hope nothing bad happens with me sending these DTP frames out. And, as a great man once said, hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. But it's also a lousy network security strategy. I said the last part. Someone else said the first part. But you get my point. Now, many well-meaning network admins are going to put this kind of port into auto mode. Okay, it makes a little sense on the surface because that means the port will trunk but isn't actively looking to do so. Well, this solution leads to another problem because a rogue host connected to a port in auto mode can pretend it's a switch and send DTP frames of its own. Then we've got a trunk between our switch and somebody else's switch. This is also a security vulnerability for Cisco switches whose default trunking mode is auto. And that's not good. That's not what we want. Now, there is a classic defense for this attack. Every port on your switch that doesn't lead to another switch that you know is under your administrative control, it should be put into access mode. Doing so disables the port's ability to create a trunk and the rogue host's ability to switch spoof. Now, I'll tell you what I really like to do, and I didn't even put it here. If I'm administering a switch and I have ports on it that aren't in use, I shut them down. Now, some people don't like to do that. Oh, I'll forget to reopen them. Blah, blah, blah. Well, just open them then. But if you shut them, you really don't have anything to worry about. The Cisco switch ports being open by default, that's a big security hole. And just shut the ones down that you don't want, that aren't going to be in use right now. And if they need to be open or your company policy is to leave them open, use the tips in this section and they'll help you avoid VLAN hopping attacks and some other attacks as well. As I mentioned in the last video, CDP, you are going to be astonished at how often you use Cisco Discovery Protocol in your career. It's really easy. You learn it in your CCNA studies, your CCNA studies, memorize a couple things, then you don't look at it for a long time and you kind of forget what's in there. Well, we're going to spend quite a bit of time in the very next video talking about what's in there. Most of it good, but a little of it bad. I'll see you on the next video and we'll talk about the good and the bad of the Cisco Discovery Protocol. See you there.